Between fall and spring, I just love having a brown ale on tap. Something malty, rich, full-bodied just sounds great in cold weather. In this video, we're going to be brewing this beautiful brown ale. Let's do it. We'll do 80% Maris Otter as our base malt, which will give it a mild malty, nutty, biscuity, bready flavor as our canvas. Then we'll also add 7% biscuit malt, 7% Crystal 60, 4% brown malt, and finally 2% chocolate malt. Hopefully that'll give us a nice balance of malt, bread, nuttiness, and a bit of sweetness that is good for this style. For hops, I've got a bunch of Centennial hops that I grew in my backyard and have just been sitting in my freezer, so I figured I would use them for this beer. They do well in pale ales and IPAs, and I think they'll probably do alright in this brown ale too. For yeast, I'm gonna go with the Imperial A09 Pub Ale. I made a small starter with it, although I probably didn't need to since Imperial packs already come with 200 billion cells. So let's get brewing. With water already at strike temperature, let's mash in. I'm just gonna do a basic mash of 150 Fahrenheit for an hour. Post-mash, and we'll drain and sparge and bring ourselves up to a pre-boil volume of about 6.4 gallons. Then ramp up to a boil. We're not really going to do anything in the boil until the final 10 minutes, when we'll add the hops. Now, we're using homegrown whole cone hops, but I don't quite know the exact alpha acid percentage, which makes me hesitant of using them as bittering hops. But since this beer isn't intended to be particularly bitter or hop oriented, I feel like I can just go ahead and toss them near the end of the boil. After boil, we'll take the hops out and cool it down to pitch temperature. Then send it all to the fermenter. The yeast I went with today is Imperial A09 Pub Ale, which is a British ale yeast, apparently sourced from the Fuller's Brewery in London. I've never actually brewed with this yeast before, so I'm excited to see how it turns out. This yeast is comparable to Y Yeast 1968 London ESB, White Labs 002 English Ale yeast, or Lallemand London ESB yeast. Just FYI. I'll go ahead and pitch that from the starter that I made. Then we'll cap it and let the yeast do its thing. I ended up letting this one ferment for 3 weeks at 67 Fahrenheit. It was probably finished before that, but I was too busy and couldn't be bothered. Original gravity 1.052, final gravity 1.012, resulting in about 5.2% ABV. A couple more weeks in the keg, and it was a snowy day outside, so I figured this was a perfect day for drinking a brown ale. So here we go. For the appearance, maybe a little bit on the lighter side of the color range than I anticipated, but I really like the complementary color of the head and body. Fairly opaque. It will probably clarify a bit more over time, but frankly, I don't really care about clarity for this style. It smells good. The taste? It's got a smooth, creamy head, a bit of sweet or bready, biscuity, maybe caramel notes. Goes down really easy. I carbonated at 2.3 volumes of CO2, and that feels about right for this style. Not too bitter, and not really any hoppy notes. For future versions of this recipe, I'd be interested in trying different British ale yeast to see which one is my favorite. For most of the British brown ale recipes I looked at, it looked like Maris Otter was the predominant base malt, with different combinations of brown malts, biscuit malts, caramel malts, as well as chocolate malts thrown in there too. There's infinite combinations of specialty malts for this style, so I'm just gonna wait for the Mean Brews YouTube channel to come out and tell me what the data says for the best British brown ale. I'm pretty happy with this one. Let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions for alternative recipes for brown ales, and maybe we can crowdsource the next brown ale recipe. Until next time, cheers.